What happens when the justice system decides that a teenager deserves the ultimate punishment, death? In today's video, we're exploring some of the most chilling and controversial cases where young individuals were sentenced to death or received life without parole for crimes that shock the world. These stories don't just raise legal questions, they force us to confront the morality of sentencing adolescents to die in prison or face execution. From brutal murders to mass shootings, each case highlights the complex intersection of youth, violence, and justice. Austin Myers. Austin Myers was just 19 years old when he received a death sentence in Ohio for the gruesome murder of Justin Back in 2014. The small community of Waynesville was shaken when Myers and his friend, Timothy Mosley, devised a plan to rob Back, who had recently graduated from high school. Pretending they were dropping by socially, they gained entry into Justin's home. Once inside, their robbery plan turned violent. They tried to strangle Back with a wire, and when that failed, Mosley fatally stabbed him over 20 times. The pair then wrapped his body in a blanket and dumped it in a rural septic tank. On top of the murder, they stole items, including a safe, and set parts of the home on fire to destroy evidence. During the trial, prosecutors highlighted the calculated and cold-blooded nature of the crime. The defense argued that Myers wasn't the one who actually killed Justin and that he hadn't intended for him to die. They emphasized his age, clean record, and developing brain. Yet, the jury didn't accept those arguments. The careful planning, attempt to destroy evidence, and Myers' lack of remorse were seen as aggravating factors that far outweighed any mitigating ones. Ultimately, Myers was convicted of aggravated murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence, leading to his death sentence in 2015, making him one of the youngest in Ohio to face execution. The sentencing sparked heated ethical debates about whether it's appropriate to impose the death penalty on someone so young. Many experts and activists pointed out that at 19, the human brain is still maturing. Despite these claims, the Ohio Supreme Court upheld his sentence. His case continues to be referenced in legal and academic discussions around juvenile capital punishment. Marlin Joseph. In 2020, Marlin Joseph was sentenced to death in Florida for the horrifying murders of Khalida Crowell and her 11-year-old daughter, Kyra Inglet. The killings took place in 2017 inside the home they all shared. Joseph had been dating Crowell and reportedly became enraged during an argument. Things escalated quickly when he pulled out a firearm and shot Crowell in the head. The violence didn't stop there. He chased Kyra as she fled outside and shot her multiple times, despite her desperate attempts to escape and plead for her life. The brutality and helplessness of the victims outraged the entire Palm Beach County community. His defense attorneys highlighted his lifelong battle with mental illness. They presented evidence of Joseph's abusive upbringing, deep depression, PTSD, and multiple suicide attempts. Psychiatrists testified that he had been in and out of mental health treatment since he was a child. However, the prosecution countered with a narrative of calculated violence and claimed Joseph had been in full control of his actions. They argued that his actions were not the result of a psychotic break.
He gonna pay. He did what he did, and he gonna pay.
Joseph's trial contributed to larger debates about how courts should weigh mental health in capital punishment cases. His attorneys argued he was mentally incompetent during the murders, but the jury found otherwise. The sentencing phase featured testimony from family members, psychologists, and others, trying to paint a complete picture of who Joseph was. Nonetheless, the aggravating factors, the young age of Kyra, the mother's sudden murder.
I'm gonna be there for you, Marlin, but I also want justice for Kyra and Kyra.
Joseph's lack of remorse resulted in a unanimous death sentence. Dexter Johnson. In 2007, Dexter Johnson was sentenced to death at the age of 18 for his role in a horrifying double murder in Houston, Texas. A year earlier, Johnson and two accomplices kidnapped Maria Aparice and her boyfriend, Hui Ying, during a carjacking. The couple was held at gunpoint and taken to a remote area, where Johnson executed both of them. Despite their cries for mercy, Johnson ordered the shootings, with investigators identifying him as the mastermind. The community was horrified by the cruelty of the crime. At trial, Johnson's attorneys argued that he suffered from significant intellectual impairments. They provided documentation of his below-average IQ. The defense contended that executing him would violate the 2002 Supreme Court decision in Atkins versus Virginia, which bans the execution of people with intellectual disabilities. Still, prosecutors successfully argued that Johnson's condition did not meet the legal definition of intellectual disability, and that he had demonstrated planning and leadership in the crimes. Johnson's case remains a focal point in debates about the death penalty and mental capacity. Critics argue that the legal system's definition of intellectual disability is too narrow and fails to protect vulnerable individuals. They also question whether someone so young should be eligible for capital punishment at all, especially when neurological development is still incomplete. Johnson remains on death row in Texas, with his case often referenced by advocates seeking reform for juveniles and mentally impaired individuals facing execution. In 2021, he brutally murdered his 13-year-old classmate Tristan Bailey. Both were students at Patriot Oaks Academy. Fucci lured Tristan into the woods near their homes, where he stabbed her an unimaginable 114 times. Her body was later discovered in a secluded area. What stunned the public even more was Fucci's Snapchat post just before the killing, where he posed with a knife and an eerie smirk. The image quickly went viral and became a chilling piece of evidence. Despite his age, prosecutors charged Fucci as an adult due to the savage nature of the crime. The case raised pressing legal and ethical questions. Mainly, how should society deal with extremely violent minors? While the Supreme Court's Roper v. Simmons decision bars the death penalty for juveniles, Fucci was still eligible for life imprisonment. His case reignited national conversations about juvenile crime, brain development, and whether teenagers are capable of fully grasping the gravity of their actions. In 2023, Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. At his sentencing, family members of Tristan Bailey delivered emotional victim impact statements, describing the devastating loss of a kind, vibrant girl. The court ultimately sentenced Fucci to life without the possibility of parole. Despite his young age, the court deemed the crime so heinous and premeditated that there was no possibility of rehabilitation. His case is now a textbook example of the end of juvenile sentencing and the ongoing struggle to balance justice, reform, and public safety. Nikolas Cruz. Nikolas Cruz was 19 when he carried out the devastating mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, in 2018. Armed with an AR-15 style rifle, he killed 17 students and staff members and wounded 17 others. The massacre was one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. Cruz had a well-documented history of violence and mental health issues, and he had been expelled from the school before the attack. Shockingly, he did not attempt to escape or conceal his identity, clearly signaling he intended to carry out the mass shooting. After his arrest, Cruz admitted guilt to all 17 murders. In 2022, a sentencing trial was held to decide whether he should be executed. Although prosecutors sought the death penalty, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision requirement under Florida law. Consequently, Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The outcome outraged many survivors and family members who felt justice had not been fully served given the scale and horror of the crime. The case reignited fierce national debates over mental health treatment, school safety, and the death penalty for young adults. Cruz's defense team claimed he was shaped by a lifetime of neglect, trauma, and mental illness. They argued that his neurodevelopmental disorders impaired his ability to control impulses. Still, critics said the slaughter of 17 innocent lives demanded the harshest punishment. Cruz's case highlights the complex intersection between youth, mental illness, and accountability in mass violence cases. Jonathan Belton. Jonathan Belton was only 16 when he was convicted of murdering Detroit police officer Larry Nevers in 2004. Belton, along with an accomplice, ambushed the officer during a confrontation and shot him multiple times. Despite Nevers trying to defend himself, he died from his injuries. The brazen attack stunned the community and law enforcement agencies across Michigan. Belton was quickly apprehended, charged as an adult, and convicted of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. At the time, it was common practice to give juvenile offenders life sentences for serious crimes. However, Belton's case would later become part of a major legal shift. The ruling acknowledged that young people have a greater capacity for change and that their age and maturity should be taken into account when sentencing. Following the Supreme Court's decision, Belton's sentence was reviewed. Though his conviction remained, the courts now had to assess whether his life sentence was truly appropriate, considering his age, background, and potential for rehabilitation. His case played a role in a national shift toward reevaluating how young offenders are punished, especially when it comes to lifelong incarceration.